On today's episode of Locked On Wild, where does the Central stand after free agency, the draft, and more?
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube so you can watch on your phone, on your laptop, on the go. Wherever you tune in, we appreciate having you, and make sure to subscribe on your favorite audio platforms as well. Whichever way you choose to listen to Locked On Wild, we're glad to have you along. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, after we went through an audit of the Minnesota Wild salary cap situation over a week ago, we're going to audit the Central Division. Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod joining us today. We're going to take a look at where all the Central Division teams stand after some big moves by a few of the teams in free agency. We'll go through and discuss what we expect from all the teams in the Central Division, including our own Minnesota Wild. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. Isha, it is that time once again for the Locked On Wild Sota Pod collaboration. And I went through and took a look at the books about a week and a half ago, like full-scale audit of the Minnesota Wild. And we were brainstorming topics for today's show, and it's like, why not just take a peek at what the Central Division has to offer, because it's been a busy offseason for several of those teams, and I could think of nobody better to help discuss than yours truly. Isha, how's it going?
Good, man. Yeah, you say peak, and then the next thing you know, I'm like, all right, Seth, canceling a work meeting. I'm going 3 hours worth of prep, and we're going balls deep into this. Sorry, pucks deep into this. So yeah, full on audit here, which is interesting because, you know, I went into it with kind of my ranking of like what teams are the best, my grading for each team, and realistically, like only one kind of jumped, and only one had a team that, based off the draft, it was really going to affect them this year. So how I went about this was I graded, I ranked them as like 1 to 8, the best to the worst, just on paper from doing a deep dive on grading the forwards, the defense, the goalie, and just comparing what the needs are for every team, National Hockey League team this next year. So I'm not grading them on who has the best, draft pool or prospect pool or anything like that, but some of those notes will come up in the discussion. So for example, at number 1, surprise, surprise, Dallas Stars, right? I give their forwards an A+, I give their defense a B, and I give their goalies, the goalie tandem in the National Hockey League, an A. I wrote here they have the best depth out of anyone in the Central, and I say that because I noted on each one notable superstars and notable depth pieces. And if you look at just their notable superstars alone, they pretty much outclass almost every other team on this list with Thomas Harley, Wyatt Johnson, Rupe Hintz, Miro Heiskanen. And then notable depth pieces, Tyler Seguin, Matt Duchene, Jamie Benn, Logan Stankoven, Mason Marchment. I mean, those are your depth pieces, to name a few, who were superstars just a few years ago, who are still putting, 50 to 60 points up respectively. I think as far as what they need the most is defense, which I graded them a B. Again, A+ forward, B defense, A goaltender. They need another top 4 defenseman or a young prospect who is ready to just make that jump, and maybe we'll see that young player this season. Gavin White is someone that they could maybe bring up for their bottoms, for their bottom pairing. Christian Kyrou, by the way, Jordan Kyrou's brother, is an absolute stud on the back end. Now, seemingly a little bit more on the offensive side, but like maybe this guy becomes as good as his brother on the back end, because he absolutely torched the AHL thus far. And maybe, and again, this is not going to be in the top 4, but kind of utilize maybe on the power play. Derek Pouliot's in their system. He's only 30 years of age. He has played multiple full years in the National Hockey League, both with the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Vancouver Canucks. And he's one of those tweeners who, like, if used in the right way in the NHL, he can be a really good puck moving guy. But if you lean on him for everything else, you know, he's an AHL defenseman, and I think he got like over 60 points in the AHL this last year. So like there's some options internally if you look at the Texas Stars, which I was actually blown away how good Dallas's depth is as well. I mean, I think right under the Wild, they and Judd Brackett, they have some of the best pro scouts, the best amateur scouts in the entire league. And it shows where a team like the Dallas Stars has been competitive for so long now and still has been able to fill the cabinets with unbelievable players.
Yeah, it really is. And I've referenced this quite a bit over the last, couple of years. It's really a situation where if you could build a team the proper way, Dallas has made heavy emphasis on draft and develop with how they've built their team. They've sprinkled a couple of trades in. But you look at that lineup, I mean, they have three full lines that can come at you, and they have a fourth line that's capable of chipping in periodically too.
And they're not going to bottom out anytime soon, because when it is time for Seguin, Ben, these guys to hang up the skates, well, they have the young crop already ready. So it's like it was almost like the San Jose Sharks for so many years. Almost.
Yeah, it's really an enviable spot to be in.
Well, Anaheim actually, Seth, is the better example, because when they won their first cup in the early 2000s, like Getzlaf and Perry, they hadn't even reached their prime yet. They were the young guys on the team, despite also being involved.
Yeah, you look at the likes of Rupe Hintz, Jason Robertson, Wyatt Johnston, they're all on the young side. Like they're 21, 22, 23. You got Logan.
I left Robertson off for the Wild fans, by the way, but he's obviously in the superstar list as well.
I was going to say, I appreciated that omission for sure.
I wonder who caught it, or if who's just going to be like, what the hell? You didn't put him on there?
Hi, Stars fans that found their way here because they didn't see Jason Robertson in the first 6 minutes of the transcript. No, this is right on. Dallas is number one. The depth is going to carry them through the season. And it feels like help on D is something that they can get at the trade deadline. Like if they need to go get somebody, they can to help out with that. Or like you said, they've got some guys waiting in the wings that could potentially help. So easy number one for me. Now, we obviously have a couple of other teams that were heavyweight contenders this past season that are still in the mix. And of course, we'll get to where the Minnesota Wild slot into all of this. We are going to continue to size up the Central Division on today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, we are in the full heat of the summer. 4th of July just passing us, but we are in the stretch run for Major League Baseball, which means there are plenty of opportunities for you to go hit the ballpark this summer. There's nothing better than sitting out in the seats, getting that tan on, grabbing a beverage, watching a few innings at your favorite ballpark. We're very spoiled here in Minnesota with Target Field. And so I encourage you to take the opportunity to go see a game for yourself. And Game Time can help make that a possibility for you this year. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. And not only that, Game Time has all of these great features as well. They offer zone deals. You pick a section and Game Time will do the rest. Plus all-in pricing and their lowest price guarantee. If you find tickets that are cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Programming note for you for next week. As mentioned earlier, I'm going to be taking the opportunity to get out in the woods. A little camping on tap, but that does not mean that we will just be taking a break from episodes till I get back. We're going into prospect week next week because we just had development camp. And this is something I've been wanting to do for the last couple of seasons here at Locked On Wild. We're going to go through organizational depth charts. Who is next in line for particular spots in the organization? What are we looking at for timetables for other guys? Who are the prospects that we should be keeping an eye on at various levels? We'll go through that position by position here this upcoming week. Plus, I've got some thoughts. Had a chance to see Charlie Stramel at development camp. I might be changing my tune a little bit. So we'll talk about Charlie Stramel. We'll talk about a few other players that turned heads at development camp. But if you missed it, because it was posted late last night, Brad Bombardier had a media availability during development camp, and we took the opportunity to just break down everything that he had to say. I got to tell you, I was impressed. So
Charlie Stramel, Minnesota Wild fans' favorite man right now.
He's starting to fill out his frame, and that has led to him unlocking a little physicality.
I've never been a hater. I know all of you in the comments are haters. I've never been a hater.
I am being pulled to the light in this regard because and I know it was just one day at development camp, so that's forming an opinion off of a small sample size of what you see. But as I'll talk about next week, I think getting to where he can kind of use that frame a little more and getting to an opportunity where he can just kind of reset, I think is going to do some good. So we'll talk about that. But let's get back to the task at hand here for today, Isha. My question is, who is number 2?
So number 2, I have the Nashville Predators, and they obviously were given a big boost by how good they played last year.
Yes.
Under Barry Trotz as both the GM and not head coach, but definitely an advisor to the coaching staff there. I mean, they did not have a team that I thought would be a tough team to play against, or, a playoff team this last year, a team that we really halfway through the season were like, okay, Nashville's a playoff team. I thought that they were going to be fringe all year, but, man, between Burnett and again, the tutelage of Barry Trotz, who's now in front office, but who has been an elite coach for so many years in the National Hockey League. With that alone, I was like, okay, they're going to take a step forward, especially with the pieces that they acquired. I give their forwards an A+, just like the Dallas Stars. I give their defense a B, and I give their goalie an A+. So you guys might be asking, well, they received higher letter grades. Why aren't they above the Nashville Predators? It's just their notable depth and superstars I just don't think are quite there. And one of their goaltenders is going to be moved. The young Askarov, he's going to be moved now, whether that's to improve maybe the defense, to give it a little bit more depth, or whatever. That could boost them, down the road. If Seth and I say redo this halfway through the season, that might put them at that number 1 spot. Hindsight's 2020, but where it stands right now, I have their notable superstars is obviously Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, Steven Stamkos, and Ryan O'Reilly, because he's one of the, like Eriksson Ek, he's an amazing two-way player who can, get 20 plus goals, 60 plus points every year. Notable depth, we got Jonathan Marchessault, Thomas Novak, Gustav Nyquist, which holy crap, dude.
Insane.
What a season he had last year. And he's always been incredibly talented. I've always loved what Nyquist has offered. It seems like everywhere he goes, he shows that he is a top 6 guy. Brady Shea now on the defense, and Dante Fabro. I do still believe that he is a good depth piece, despite him not being the biggest point getter. There's a reason they're still keeping him on the roster. There's a reason they haven't moved away from him when they have already with some of these younger pieces as well. Goalies, obviously, I give him an A+ because right now it's the best duo in the division. You could argue it's the best duo in the league. so good that Askarov will have to be traded. I wrote might in my notes, but let's be honest, he will have to be traded. They're going to probably keep the duo for a little bit and then move him for, if they recognize, we really do need some depth on defense, we're gonna trade him for a really good depth piece. But the defense, like Dallas, they have a couple guys on the farm team anyways, in Mark Delgazzo and Adam Wilsby. But for the most part, I feel like that would be the target. A really good or even young defenseman who can play in the National Hockey League if and when they do trade Askarov. And they can even maybe add to that deal by giving up one of their young and decent forwards as well. I wrote that there's actually a lot of forward prospects in their system just playing in Milwaukee last year. Igor Afsanayev. They have this savage dude from Quebec who put up 48 points and 197 penalty minutes in Zachary Lheureux. They have Joachim Kemmel and Fedor Sveshkov, who are all awesome forward prospects. And I feel like you package one or two of those with the goaltender, you can get like a top pairing defenseman.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think that will be the move from the Nashville Predators. Their forward depth is already awesome. So whether one of these young guys make the team or not, like they have room to solidify the pieces and trade for the pieces that they need to really make their defense an A as the season starts.
I'm so glad you put Nashville as 2, because I have the perfect way to describe why Dallas is 1 and why Nashville is 2. I think you can make a compelling case that Nashville could put a better top line together than Dallas. But Nashville is going to hit you with 2 really, really solid lines. And after that is where it kind of starts to whittle out a little bit. And Dallas has 3 legitimate lines that they can hit you with. And so that's why they get the edge in the rankings.
Well, and like, I'm sorry, Ottinger's amazing. I gave the goalie an A, but to me, Saros is the best goaltender in the league. Like I'd be willing to argue that up against anybody.
Yeah, it's just this is a depth comparison for me. Is that yes, Nashville might have the better top end across the board, but Dallas has more depth, and that's what it comes down to at the end.
And they both have depth, which is what's terrifying, right?
Yeah, this is going to be fun to watch those two duke it out at the top of the division.
Oh, it's going to be fun
all season. We had Dallas 1, Nashville 2. I can only imagine that a certain Rocky Mountain franchise is going to slot in as number 3.
Yeah, it's definitely not the Minnesota Wild. It's the Colorado Avalanche. I give their forwards an A+, with an asterisk, though. It's an A+, with the likes of, Nikushin playing and with Landeskog not on LTIR, okay? Without those two, I still give it an A, but maybe it's closer to an A-. But with those two guys added alone, it gives them an A+. Again, Valerie's not going to be playing at the start of the year, so there's that. But Landeskog, we'll see. But overall, forwards A+, and even without them, they have enough depth that like you still could. You're rating their forwards the highest. Whether you guys want to say it's A-, A+, it's in the A's. Okay, I'm still going to give it an A+. Defense, I'm giving a B, and goalie C+. C+, maybe even a C, but I'm aiming a little high. I'm being a little glass half full here. A+. Now, they're notable superstars. Again, Valery Nikushkin has the asterisk there due to him re-entering the Players Assistance Program. Gabriel Landeskog, assuming he's not on LTIR. I'm putting both of those at superstars. I mean, look what Valery did last year. Like, amazing, right? So I'm putting them at the superstar status there. Obviously, Nathan MacKinnon, arguably the best player in the league behind McDavid, right? Mikko Rantanen, right up there as well. That's McKinnon's freaking... now McKinnon's his right-hand man, right? Yeah. When Landeskog's not there, but he's up there as well. And then
we're not talking Batman and Robin. We're talking Batman and Batman.
Yeah. And then obviously Cale Makar, who's he's not as good as Quinn Hughes. I know that, guys, but he's up there as well. He's just as good as Quinn Hughes. We'll say that. Yeah. And Quinn Hughes, and I'm the Canadian here, and I'm saying that the American's better. just saying, guys. Just saying. Their notable depth. Casey Middlestat, what a year he had, right? Yeah. Arturi Lehkonen, love Arturi Lehkonen. I feel like he has like a cult following, but like their smart cult following because he has a wicked shot and he's just so fucking good. Devin Taves, Jonathan Drouin, who just joined the team, back with MacKinnon. I don't know if you knew this, Seth, but he played his junior hockey with MacKinnon in Halifax. Both of them putting up 120, 130-point seasons. Ross Colton, Samuel Girard, Josh Mason, all notable depth pieces. You could add a few more to that list as well. But again, like, they are a very, very good team. They need a goalie, though. Plain and simple, they need a goalie.
Yep.
It's just not going to cut it with what they have this year in the National Hockey League if they want to be contenders again. Will they make the playoffs with what they have up front and like the offense that these guys produce? Absolutely. But are they going to get knocked out of the playoffs early without any goaltending? Yes, they will. They will. And shoot, are they going to get a good matchup in the playoffs due to, Nashville and Dallas running the show, and, Winnipeg and Minnesota should be, still hard teams to play against. Goaltending is going to expose this team. They're not going to be able to outscore their way to a win every single game, right? Now, they have some guys in the system, but I really don't think they're full-time NHL ready yet. Ivan Prosvetov, he's good, and I think he played 1 or 2 games last year. He's good. He ripped up the AHL. We'll see, right? And then they have Trent Miner, who did good in the AHL, but he also developed in the ECHL this year as well. He's just not NHL ready. But those are 2 guys that they can probably continue to develop. They could bring in some depth on D or in the bottom pairing of their forwards as well. And I wrote here with the asterisks, even the top 6, depending on Landeskog's injury, depending on if they can replicate what they did last year without Valerie, right? Some notable guys they have in the system, though, Jean-Luc Foudy, you'll love this one. Ivan. No joke. His first name is his last name. His last name is his first name. I love it. Cal Burkle, Ben Myers, Minnesota boy Riley Tuft. Tuft, okay. And damn, he's actually really good playing on the wing. Cedric Power, Jack Ahar, and Sam Malinsky on defense. So those are notable guys who are brewing in the minors. Whether they're ready to come up or not yet, I mean, that's to be determined. But those are some guys that I've highlighted. I've checked off as okay. They could get opportunities if this team wants to look internal before they look for a trade. But overall, I'm giving the forwards A+ still because of the notable superstars and the notable depth that they have. Yeah. Defense B, goalie C+. They really need to address that.
I'm hoping that what happened against Winnipeg gave them some pause about committing to Georgiev long term because, well, I'm not hoping because
he's fine, but he's not. Yeah, he's not a top guy.
When you go up against the likes of Connor Hellebuyck, and I know the Avs were able to score a handful of goals in that series against Hellebuyck, but more often than not, you're not going to do that, and you're just not going to win that goalie matchup going up against Hellebuyck when you've got Georgiev on your end. You're just not going to win that matchup. So it'll be interesting to see because I'm fully with you. If they get anything from Landeskog or Nichushkin, that's going to vault them up this list because when they have all those guys at their disposal, they just hit a completely different stratosphere.
Yeah.
And until they do, that 3 is the perfect spot for them to be. We've got one more team to take a look at in the first half of our rankings, sizing up the Central Division. We'll take a look at who hit number 4 on the way after this here on Locked On Wild. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen after this episode is done, make sure to hit part 2 of our 2-part series, Sizing Up the Central Division. We'll go through teams number 5 through 8 with Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod coming up later for you here this afternoon. But back to it. Who is the mystery number 4 team? Let's find out.
I almost put the Winnipeg Jets, who are at number 4, above them because of the asterisks of those 2 guys. But I mean, when MacKinnon and Makar are on your team, it just that was the edge, right? That was the edge. However,
that's the separator.
The Winnipeg Jets, I give their forward an A-, but still in the A's. Defense, a C+. And their goalie, A+. Connor Hellebuck, right up there with Saros. You can make the argument that he's one of, if not the best goaltenders in the league. Top 3, top 5, wherever you want to put him. He's up there as one of the best. Notable superstars, Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Josh Morrissey, and Nikolai Ehlers. Now, some people might be listening and be like, yo, none of those guys are superstars. I would argue that, but fine. Throw them in the notable depth, and this team might be the best depth team in the division with Cole Perfetti, Alex Iafallo, Neil Poink, Nino Niederreiter, Adam Lowry, Gabe Velarde, Vladislav Nemestikov, and you could probably even add a couple more guys to the list there, but those are my notable depth pieces. And if you only want to put, say, Scheifele, Ehlers, and Morrissey in the notable superstars, well, Kyle Connor, man, like you put him in notable depth, like, yeah, bro.
He's got to be in one of those two categories, and I would tend to put him in the superstar above the depth. Like, I always look at this like, where are you putting these guys on a playoff team, like a bona fide playoff team? And you'd put Mark Scheifele. He'd definitely be a top 6 guy on a playoff team. Kyle Connor would probably be a top line guy. So there's just no question as to they're not just Winnipeg's best players. They're good players in their own right.
Yeah. And obviously when it came to Nashville, when it comes to this list, like Hellebuck and Saros are in those superstars. I'm just strictly speaking skaters right now, because I will dive into the goaltending as I have been. They need another young guy to pop to be a superstar or via trade. Their defense, they basically need to replace the big presence that they lost this offseason, right? And I believe they have some guys in the system that can do it. Kyle Capo Bianco, he's a big boy. He was solid. Ville Heinola is not a big defenseman, but he's not small. He's a good puck moving. Finn. This is the guy, though, I think. This is the guy who will be playing on the Winnipeg Jets roster this year. Jeffrey Viel, he had 142 penalty minutes, and he's actually played a good chunk of an NHL season with the Winnipeg Jets before. It was like over 30 games one year, and he has 49 games of NHL experience already. He got a decent amount of points. It was over 30 points in the AHL and 142 penalty minutes. Now, I'm sure the coaches in Winnipeg will want him to dial it back a bit, but if you're replacing like Dylan on the back end, that's the big presence
spot to go
that you want. In regards to forwards that they have coming up in the system, say they trade Nikolai Ehlers or they trade a Kyle Connor for a defenseman or for whatever piece that they feel like they're lacking up front. Well, they have Brad Lambent, they have Parker Ford, and they have Nikita Chibrikov as forwards in the minors who are absolute studs. Now, if they bring up, say, the Jeffrey Viel, a Ville Heinola, and one or two of these forward guys, and they pop, like I said, it only takes one of these guys to pop for them to be another superstar on the team, they might jump to the number 2 or 3 spot, because that's how good this Winnipeg Jets was during the season.
Yeah, and it is interesting because the Jets had such a good year at limiting scoring by opponents, but I think that is just a good example of how a system can really help that overall team defense. And it's been a quiet offseason for Winnipeg. They're still good, but I love having them at the number 4 spot.
Yeah,
here,
and that's what leads me to believe that they're gonna bring up some of these guys.
Yeah,
right. And they're like, we already have the spots in house. We don't need to spend the money.
Yeah, let's just fill from within. Boy, that sounds nice. So
dude,
we're
this Jeffrey Viel kid. Like, I mean, he's not even a kid. He's like 25, 26. Like, he is a menace. I was watching some tape on him. Like, oh my God. Z would call him a psychopath. He's that type of guy. Like, he just hits everything that moves. He's not quick, but he skates decent, right? Like, he definitely can skate in the National Hockey League. And he's not dumb. Like, he has decent puck IQ, right? Like, if he needs to get involved in the play and move the puck up, he can. He's just not going to be the one skating through everyone, bringing it into the offensive zone.
Sure. That will do it for part 1 of our 2-part series, Sizing Up the Central Division. We thank you for tuning in to part 1 here today. Make sure to check out part 2 coming up later this afternoon. And make sure to hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe on your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you are tuning in here today, we appreciate you making Locked On Wild part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.